Today we'll start on the bottom line of Beis and the Beis. Is that okay? Take this time?
Yeah, I'm going to read the names.
We're starting with the last two words, Elameata. Rather from now, means according to what we've said. So let's go back just for a second. We're talking about a mavi, which is an alleyway, which has a crossbeam that goes across the entranceway of the alley. If it's too high, so the Mishnah said that you have to lower it down. Now, what was the reason why too high is too high? So we had a statement from Rav, it was actually Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rav, that we learned from the entranceway to the Heichal, entranceway to the sanctuary. Now, based on that, we had some difficulties because if the entranceway to the Heichal, if the Machlekes, the Rabbanan, and Rabbi Yehuda was regarding the entranceway to the Heichal or the entranceway to the Ulam, then it would come out different halachas. Things would be a little different. So now we're continuing that issue that we have, that if we're learning, which is the way Rav does, that we're learning from the entranceway to the Heichal, so then Elamiyat, if so, Leitahani Le'amaltra, then an amaltra shouldn't help. You know, an amaltra is something that would catch your attention. If I have a beam that's above 20 amas, so really it's invalid. But if there's an amaltra there, then it is valid. Even though it's too high, but the amaltra catches your attention. You know, we'll see what an amaltra is. We're going to have two opinions. It's either some sort of bird nest or some sort of expensive wood, so something large. So that's gonna catch your attention even if it's too high. The only problem is the Gemara on the top of Gimel Amar Aleph says the Heichal Amaltra Havelei V'Afil Achem Esrmama Hu D'Gavaya. The problem is that the entranceway to the sanctuary had a Amaltra. If you look at pictures, the Amaltra would be, if you have a picture of the Heichal, it has lines that are going above the doorway, and the lines seem to get wider. So that's at least in the pictures. So that would catch the person's attention. And if that would be above the doorway, then the top of the doorway, that crossbeam that goes across, could even be higher than 20 amas. That's what we learned according to with the Mavi. The problem is that if you learn from the Heichal, and the Heichal has an Amaltra, and the Heichal itself is only 20 amas. Why is the Heichal only 20 amas? It could be even higher than 20 amas if it has an Amaltra. Or if our source is that Amaltra works, even if it's above 20 amas, then in our source for the 20 amas is the Heichal, then I have no source that Amaltra works above 20 amas because the Heichal was 20 amas and with Amaltras. I have no source that above 20 amas and Amaltra is going to help. Okay, we'll see with the Gemara halfway down the page. We'll talk about what exactly the Amaltra is. But meanwhile, we're just asking on Rav, that if the source is the sanctuary, if the source for the doorway is the sanctuary, so then it's going to leave us with a question regarding Amaltra. The Tanan was taught in the Mishnah, learning about the Amaltra. Chamish Amaltreis shel Mila hayu al gabav zulamayla mizu zulamayla mizu. There was 5 Amaltres of Mila. Mila is a type of wood. I think it's like a gallnut wood. And this was above the Heichal. Zulamayla mizu, one on top of another. Okay, the Gemara says we can give an answer. As the question is that why should Amaltra work and kosherize a doorway that's above 20 amas if the whole source of 20 amas is from the Heichel, and the Heichel itself has a malcha. So it says, Hi my tiyufta, Dilma ki tanya hida malchais bulim tanya. Maybe that Mishnah is talking about that the amalcha was in front of not the sanctuary, which was 20 amas. The amalcha was in front of the hallway. And the Rabbanan don't learn from the hallway. They learn from the sanctuary. So the assumption, the question was based on misinformation. That's what's going on. So the Gemara says, V'hai mai kushya. So what is that question that you're asking on the answer? That you're asking on the question. What's the question on the question? Which means, what's the answer? Dil matavnes heichel ketavnes ulam. Very strange wording for a question. It's like, I can ask you a question with a possibility. The Gemara has the word Dilma there. I think the Rishonim want to they challenge what this Dilma is doing. But maybe there's a problem. Maybe the Heichel is the same as the Ulam. Both the sanctuary and the hallway have a malcha, which is these beams that are growing across above the doorway. And if that's the case, then we have a question. And and then we have a problem. So there's possibly a problem. We don't know. So the Gemara says, Alama amar Rabbi Rav. Why does Rabbi say in the name of Rav? And Rav is the one that's really the issue here. Because Rav is the one that says we learned from the Heichel about the size of the doorway. He says, Roch v'dalet af b'shein abriya. Talking about the alleyway. And now the cross beam that goes across the alleyway has to be strong enough to hold a brick. Has to be able to support a brick, the brick, size and weight. Let's say it's weak. So then it's not good enough. However, the size of it can make up for the weakness. If it's wide, four tvachim, it's a rather wide beam. This is not a 2x4. This is 4 tvachim. Could be maybe like a 12 by a half an inch or less. More than 12. A tefach is probably 4 inches. In between 3 and 4 inches. So if it's wide, from 12 to 16 inches, 4 tvachim, even if it's very thin, so then that's considered a kaira that goes across a mavi. It's good enough even if it's weak. That's the first point. Second point is, yem yesh la amaltra, and if it has an amaltra, which we said we'll explain later, but it's something definitely that will catch the attention of people. I feel even if it's above 20 amas, you don't have to lower it down. And that's our problem. Our problem is that you're telling me that amaltra works. Even if the doorway is above 20 amas. But where do you see amaltra? By the Heichel, and the Heichel is only 20 amas. So Rav Yosef answers this question. He says, you're making it look like there's a contradiction here, that Rav says amaltra works, and Rav also says we learn from the Heichel. Let me tell you, you have it wrong. Amaltra masnisihi. Rav, that statement that you just said, Rabbi Eily in the name of Rav, that amaltra works. That means if I would have the crossbeam of a mavi would be above 20 amas. Put an amaltra would still be kosher, even according to the rabbis, even according to the first opinion. That is not a statement of Rav. So you're all set. It's not a statement of Rav. It's a brisa, but it's not a statement of Rav. So you're fine. Rav says that we learn from the Heichel, but there's a brisa that says amaltra works. The brisa won't fit with the learning from the Heichel, but that was Rav's opinion, says that we learn from the Heichel. Gemara says, Man katanila, who taught this brisa? Amrabaya, Chama Breder, it's Rav Chama. Chama Breder Rabba Baravua Katanila, was taught by Chama Brei de Rabbi Baravua. Okay. The Gemara asks, "V'tehebi amaltra masnisa v'tikshe l'rav." So what did he gain? He said that it wasn't Rav that said it. So what? It's a brisa that said it. And a brisa, by the way, Rav is an Amira usually. Rav is considered an Amira unless we have reason to say otherwise. But the point, the line between Tanaim and Amiraim is usually considered Rabbi Danasi. He was the last Tana. And after that, even his students, they're considered Amiraim. So Rav learned by Rabbi Danasi, but he's considered an Amira. Even though it says in some places Rav Tanu Palik, apparently that's not an accepted fact. And even when we say it, we try to avoid saying that. So here we're saying that we have a brisa that says that a maltra works. Rav would say that it doesn't work. So you thought you were answering it by saying, oh, well, it wasn't Rav that said a maltra works and Rav that says a maltra doesn't work. That would be a real contradiction. They said, no, it's just a brisa that said it. Says, well, the brisa is also a difficulty because it's a brisa against Rav. So when Samalach Rav responds to that. He says, Dalana miyacha, remove me from this equation. Masnisa milei kasha adadi, don't you have a contradiction between two brisas? Now, what are the two brisas? Yesterday we learned a brisa that said that Mavri we quoted it to say that there was a brisa that misled Rav. Brisa says like this, Titania, it's a Tosefta, actually. Mavi shegavaya michaf ama yesem mipischa shel heichel yamayat. If a mavi is above 20 amas, more than the doorway of the heichel, you should lower it down. That means that there's a source for the size of the doorway is 20 amas. But that source, this doorway is 20 amas, that source is the heichel. Now we have another brisa that you're telling me it's a brisa, that an amaltra works. Even if it's above 20 amas, it's going to be kosher. But if the source is the heichel, which was 20 amas, and it also had an amaltra, so how do you have any proof that an amaltra above 20 amas should work? The whole source of 20 amas is the heichel, and the heichel itself had a malcha, and it was only 20 amas. So Rav is saying, Rav would say to you, Amalach Rav, right? Rav would say to you, Rav isn't actually here at this discussion. Rav would say to you that there's a contradiction between the brises. So take me out of this. You have your own issues that you need to resolve, and then I'll step back in once you resolve them. So how are you going to resolve that contradiction? Tanai, you're going to say that there's two brises. How do you resolve the contradiction? You say that there's a machlekes. So there's a machlekes. Very good. So lididi nami tanai. So there's also machlekes for me, and I go by the other opinion. I go by the opinion that we learn from the heichel, and therefore an amaltra won't work according to me. We said before that Rav says amaltra works. We adjusted that to say it wasn't Rav who said it. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak comes in and he suggests a different interpretation. He says, "B'lei Rav masnaisa dadi lekashin." Without Rav, we really have no contradiction here. Rav was the one that emphasized that we learn from this. We learn the size of the doorway, the size of an entranceway. We learn from the heichel. Without Rav, it doesn't have to be like that. It goes like this. The Rabbanon Kaira Taimamai, the Bacha Justice, I think. What's the reason for the beam? That it needs to be within 20 amas. Shem HaKeira. You have to be able to recognize. V'hai diktani yesim yipiska shalulim simana ba'alma. don't get confused and think that when it says in the Brisa that 20 amas, like the doorway of the Heichal, is telling me that that's the source of the size of the doorway. It just wants to tell you in association that you should remember the size. Everyone knows that the Heichal is 20 amas. So when it says, how high can a Mavi be? It says 20 amas, like the size of the Heichal. Not that the Heichal has anything to do with this. It's just an association. It's just a way of letting you know 20 amas. If that's the case, then if it has nothing to do with the Heichal, so then whether the Heichal has Amaltra or not, it doesn't matter. What's the point of the door what's the reason why you need to have that crossbeam? Is because you have to be able to see it. You have to be able to see it, and therefore it needs to be within 20 amas. Now, what Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak is doing is he's telling us that we're talking about an alleyway. Now, an alleyway is a Rosh Hashanah. Minatayr, it's a Rosh Hashanah. Really, you should be allowed to carry there. The problem is at the end of the alleyway is a Rosh Hashanah. So people are carrying there, and there's a lot of people going into the Chatzar, and everyone's carrying there. Someone may overstep the boundary of the alleyway and step into the Rosh Hashanah carrying something. So we want to put a marker there. Don't cross that line. So the marker that we put is the crossbeam. Now, if you put it too high, then people won't be able to see it. So the point of the marker is just to recognize, don't step over the line. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Hani Chayilay Svir Le Hadarabba, Elay Svir Le Hadarabba, because there's going to be a problem. What is Rabbah? This is a quote from a Gemara in Sukkah. Let's learn what Rabbah says, and then we'll discuss it. Amar Rabbah, Ksiv L'man Yedu Dar Yosefin Ki B'Sukkah Shafti. Says so that the generations should know that I had you dwell in a sukkah. Now, the way Rabbah understands this pasuk is the simple interpretation is that when you came out of Egypt, you dwelt in sukkahs, and in order so that you should know that, so that you should remember that miracle, so you dwell in sukkahs today. That's why I command you to dwell in sukkahs. The way Rabbi learns this pasuk is that so that the generations should know when they're sitting in a sukkah that they're sitting in a sukkah. Not so that the generation should know that in history we sat in sukkahs, but so that generation should know that when you're in a sukkah, you should be able to see that you're in a sukkah. That I commanded you to sit in a sukkah. Which Rabbi is telling me that the law of the height of a sukkah is based on this pasuk. That I have to be able to know that I'm in a sukkah, and therefore the height of a sukkah can't be above 20 amas. Because if it's higher than 20 amas, then when I'm sitting in it, I don't look up I can't see the roof. If it's narrow, if the sukkah is narrow. I can't see the roof. And so I don't know that I'm in a sukkah. So
obviously they were not in Miami where it rains, so obviously they didn't have any rain there.
I'll tell you, it could be the pshat is that when it rains, they didn't have to sit in the sukkah. They weren't Chabad. They didn't sit in the sukkah in the rain. So when it's not raining, they have to be able to know that they're in a sukkah. So it goes like this. It's above 20 amas, his eye doesn't reach it, doesn't reach the schach, so he doesn't know that he's dwelling in a sukkah. Alma, what's our question now? What's the reason why the schach needs to be within 20 amas? You have to be able to see it. What's the reason why the crossbeam of the Mavi needs to be within 20 amas? You need to be able to see it. If ligu betarti lamali, why do they have to argue about the same thing twice? See, I would have thought this is great. It's so consistent. where the Rabbanan hold 20 amas is the height where you can see, and you see it's by a mavi, and you see it's by a sukkah. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that maybe a person can see above 20 amas, or maybe it doesn't. You don't need to see it. So by the sukkah, it's fine if it's above 20 amas, and by the mavi, it's fine above 20 amas, and it's consistent and it's great. But for the Gemara, that's not great. They don't need the consistency. They need that there should be nothing superfluous. So why do you have to say the same thing twice? So the Gemara says, it's necessary. So we're asking on Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Nachman Bar Yitzchak says that the reason for the Mavi 20 amas is so that you should be able to see it. But we know that it takes 20 amas to see, up to 20 amas person to see. We know that from Sukkah. Why do you have to say it again by Mavi? It says Tzricha. Yashmin and Gabi Sukkah. If we would say it by Sukkah. But how come Rabbi Yehuda, over there Rabbi Yehuda holds that it could be above 20 amas. Kivan del yeshiva bida shalta b'yena. Because when you're sitting down, and people when they sit down, they look around, so they'll be able to see higher than 20 amas, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda is lenient, and he holds that a very tall sukkah is acceptable, even above 20 amas. Avol mavi del hilachavit, but in an alleyway, which that's just a means that you get from the Rishis Rabbin to your courtyard to your house. So you're really just walking through it. So when you're walking through it, you're not going to look up. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds over there that 20 amas is the limit. And he doesn't hold that it can go higher. Maybe he'll agree to the Rabbanan by a mavi. So that's why we need the Mishnah in Eiruvin to tell me that Rabbi Yehuda over there also holds, even when it's just a way of walking through, that it's still acceptable if it's above 20 amas. V'yashmin and baha. And if it would only tell me here by the mavi, it would be a big chiddush. Rabbi Yehuda holds, even though you're walking through above 20 amas, is still good. Baha kami Rabbanan. Maybe the Rabbanan over here hold that it's only until 20 amas because you're walking through. Aval bahach. But if we go back to the sukkah, maybe by the sukkah, the Rabbanan would say that it could be higher than 20 amas. Tzricha, we need both Mishnayos. Okay. Now, the Bach, there's a very famous Bach based on the statement of Rabbi Laman Yedu Deresechem. The Bach explains why the Poskim bring, there's a machlekes why we sit in, it's machlekes Tanoim, why we sit in the sukkah. If it's because of the clouds of glory that surrounded us in the desert, or if it's because we built sukkahs. The Poskim bring those reasons. The Bach says, why do the Poskim have to bring it? They have to bring the reasons. He says, because there's a halacha that when you sit in the sukkah, you have to know that the reason why you're sitting in the sukkah. So it's not just you bring someone to the sukkah and you don't tell him it's a sukkah, and he eats in it and he's yaitzer. He says, no, the whole mitzvah of sukkah is to be aware of the background of sukkah that Hashem commanded, and that this is a sukkah and the reason and the miracles. You have to have all of that awareness to fulfill that mitzvah. Now, it's good to have that awareness by other mitzvahs as well, and it could be mitzvah shlichus kavana, but it doesn't mean that that is the mitzvah. According to the Bach, it's an integral part of the mitzvah is to have that awareness. Okay.
Rabbi Smith,
yeah.
It seems to me that finding a pasuk to support the height is a much more satisfying explanation than looking to the Beis HaMikdash, because the Jews were in Israel hundreds of years before the Beis HaMikdash was built. And presumably they were building homes and there were courtyards and so forth. So if you say, well, now that the Beis HaMikdash is built, it's an easy reference point because everyone knows it.
Yeah.
That's easy to understand, but if you don't take that opinion, what did people do before the Beis HaMikdash was built?
Yeah. So I have a non-historically proven possible answer to that. Take maybe Rabbi Lipsker can verify this. It could be the source, the pasuk is supporting the height of a sukkah. The pasuk is the support for the height of the sukkah. That I have to know, okay, when it comes to the mavai, I don't know what, that's all a rabbinic law. I don't know at which point that rabbinic law was introduced. You see, biblically, you can carry in that mavi. It's Rishus HaYachid. It's a private domain. It's not a place for the public. Now, I guess anyone could walk in there, but it's not like considered like a highway or a street or something, a plaza. So biblically, so the rabbis instituted that you need to put a crossbeam there, just for that.
It's like a gather.
Together, it's a takana to make sure that you don't cross over. Now the question is, when the rabbis instituted it, they set it at a certain height where it needs to be, where it needs to be. So it could be that it was only after the Beis Hamikdash was built where this it was instituted. I'm not sure. I don't know at what point the halachas of this. It says Shlomo Melech instituted Eiruvin. If this was instituted by Shlomo Melech, then that would be great. Time of the Beis Hamikdash. It would match perfectly. Only thing is, I don't know if this one, it says he instituted Eiruvin, and I don't know if it means the Mavai, or if it means it's other parts, this Eiruvin Chatzeres. I don't know exactly the details there. That would match, and it would say, for Sukkah, I have a source. They were sitting in Sukkah since they came in, right? And since they came into Eretz Yisrael, they were sitting in Sukkahs. What about the beam on the Mavai? They didn't know how, they didn't have the Heichel yet. How were they supposed to know? The answer is, I don't know if they had beams on the Mavai until they had the Heichel. Right? That would resolve that would resolve what the discussion was going on. Okay, now the Gemara asks the basic question, Maya Maltra. What is the Maltra? Rav Chama Breidu Rabbi Baravua Amar. He was the one that we said before had the brisa regarding Amaltra. He says, Hine. It's a bird's nest. Yasser Abdimi Amar Ami B'Marava. They said when Rabdimi came, Rabdimi was a traveler. So he brought information from Eretz Yisrael. He said, they said in the West is referring to Eretz Yisrael, if you live in Babel, Iraq. So he said, Paskid Arza, it's poles of cedar wood. We had this right at the end of Shabbos. I think we had Paskid Arza that was supposed to be expensive wood. Mandam or Paskid Arza, if you say that these beams would catch your attention, because they're expensive, Kolshken Kini, then bird's nest would definitely catch your attention. So Mandam or Kine, the one that said bird's nest would catch your attention and would work even though it's above 20 amas, but if there's a whole zoo up there. So Aval Paskidar Zaloi, but Paskidar Zaloi Lavdafka not necessarily would catch your attention. Mandam or Paskidar Zaloi my timer. What's the reason? Why would Paskidar Zaloi work? Mishum de Nafesh Mishche. We're going on to a new question. Because it's long. We have a question on the opinion that says Paskidars. Paskidars is these large beams. These large beams catch your attention, and therefore, if a mavi is made from these, if these beams are on top of the mavi or beneath the mavi or on top of the mavi, so they'll catch your attention. Your eyes will see that that's the mark for where you're not allowed to go past. So if that actually works, then there's a little bit of an issue, because we said that the sukkah also needs to be able to, your eyes need to be able to see it. The schach of the sukkah, your eyes need to be able to, it needs to catch your vision. 1 second. The schach has to be put on something. It's supposed to put on a beam or something. There has to be a beam going across, which is long also. Why are you saying that it can only be 20 amas? Every sukkah has a beam that goes across. Elakivan the kachashiv is like the Gemara answers. It's not just a long beam. A 2x4 isn't going to catch your attention. It's to be something chashiv. It's a special paskidars. It's the cedar wood. They use cedar wood. I think they usually use it in like closets for keeps away moths. It has a nice smell. Cedar closets or chests. Okay. So that causes a publicity. It's like color. It's a publicity, but a regular sukkah is a regular 2x4. No one's walking by saying, "Hey, look, Home Depot." Doesn't catch anyone's attention. Okay.
So what's the conclusion? If you could just give us a quick conclusion over here. This is like going to another semi-different points now.
So it seems like an Amaltra would help if the point of the Mavoi is to catch. If we follow Reb Nachman by Yitzchak,
and the Amaltra is a nest?
It's either a nest. It's something that's going to catch your attention. So it would go like this.
A balloon?
Yeah, it would be the same thing. One of the poskim said something interesting. Like, just give me 1 second to go back. Reb Nachman by Yitzchak changes the story that we're learning from the Heichal. He says it has to do with attention. It has to do with catching your vision. So then 20 amas would be the limit, unless there's something else that would be there that would catch your attention. So there's a discussion about Ner Chanukah. So Ner Chanukah is supposed to be, the candles are supposed to, you're not supposed to have a menorah that's above 20 amas. It won't catch your attention. So one of them said, but if you put up like colorful lights, then it'll catch your attention. Anyway, the problem is that colorful lights during that season will not necessarily symbolize that it's Hanukkah. So anyway, I don't know if that's going to work so well. Yeah, and also the real question is, what do you mean? Every light catches. I mean, there's nothing more than the light itself is. I don't know how that's going to work. Okay, miktsas. That's what we're holding. That's based on Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak. This is a halacha like Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak. I believe that the poskim say that it is because he's later than Rav in halacha k'basroi. I believe that's how they ask him. There's a Rashba that says it. Okay, miktsas koira b'teich esrim and miktsas koira l'mayla mi'esrim. Very interesting question. He said the beam needs to be 20 amas high. Let's say it is 20 amas high, but the lower part of the beam the beam can't be above 20 amas. The lower part of the beam is within, and the upper part of the beam is above. So your eye should be able to catch the lower part of the beam. No, that would be simple. Let's say the next case. Mikza schach b'teich esrim, mikza schach l'mayla mi'esrim. The schach can't be above 20 amas. So the schach is thick. The lower part of the schach is within, and the upper part of the schach is above. Is that acceptable? So if it has to catch your eye, it should be fine. Amar Rabbi, who's the one that had the whole thing about that you have to be able to see it. He says, "B'mavi kosher b'sukkah pasol." He says it's not valid in a sukkah. It's kosher in a mavi, but not valid in a sukkah. Yeah, we have to explain this. Ma'ishna b'mavi the kosher. Why is it kosher by a mavi? Damrin and kalish. Damrin and kalish means that we can say, let's just look at the upper part of the beam as if it's not there, and the lower part of the beam is there, so which makes it kosher. Now, even though it's very thin now because you've just removed most of your beam and you have a thin, weak beam there, but nevertheless it's okay. So sukanami le makalish. Why don't you do the same thing with the schach? Remove the top part and you're left with kosher schach, which is underneath it. Gemara says, no, you can't do that. Even though it's all figurative, you're not actually removing it. It's imaginary. But if you remove it because has no halachic significance because it's too high, you're going to have more sun than shade. It's going to be a problem. The schach that's too high doesn't count. Gemara says, well, Hachanami Kalshas have Lukarni tells Beruach. Then the Mavi shouldn't work. If it's too thin, that the wind will blow it in half. So it shouldn't. If the imaginary removal actually weakens it, thins it out, then you're left with with not a kosher amount. Elal karchach, rather, what do you have to say for the mavi? Why is it kosher? Nasu kishpudin shamateches. It's because it's shpudin shamateches. It becomes like spits of iron. In other words, although I remove the top part.
This is incredible imagination stuff. I'm tired. That no one had a smiley face somewhere here, imagining things. Wow.
The scholars would say, this Talmudist scholars, the yeshivas don't learn like this, but the Talmudists would say that this was the stamaim that are discussing it. You don't see any names that are doing this back and forth. And so this is, that's not the way we learn in yeshiva. So every step over here has to have logic. So it says like this. What's our solution? Our solution is that we now imagine that although you've thinned it out by the mavi, but I turn that thinned out things into as if it's spits of iron. So even though it's not very thin, but it's still going to work. So if you're able to imagine that the top part isn't there, but you will also give it the strength as if it is there, then you could also imagine that the top part isn't there, but give it the fullness of Tzelasim Rub Mechamasa, that there's more shade than sun, and it should be effective. Amar mi Parzakia. Rav mi Parzakia says, Sukkah de Yachidi Midkar. There's a problem. Yitzi spoke about this at the Siyum. A sukkah, who's in the sukkah? There's a guy sitting in the sukkah. Let's say the schach falls in, that's within 20 amas. The kosher part of the schach fell in. He looks up, he still sees the schach there. Why? Because there's other schach, which was above 20 amas. So he won't realize that he doesn't have it there. But if there's a bunch of people there, everyone says, you sure this is kosher? You sure this is kosher?
I had that last year. I was sitting in the sukkah and half of it collapsed in and winds and granites. Half the schach collapsed in.
So that's probably one. It left a big gap in the.
But was it 20 amas high?
No. What would be interesting?
Building was, but not the sukkah.
You measure 20 amas from the floor of the sukkah, not from downstairs the street. You measure from, if it's on a balcony, you measure from the floor of the sukkah. So if it's a public, they'll remind each other. And because it's for the public, I saw an interesting thing. The Gra would lane, on Shabbos Chol Hamoed, on Pesach, you say Shir. On Shabbos Chol Hamoed Sukkos, you lane Kehelas. The Gra would lane it with a bracha. From a Megillah with the bracha, he would do that. Remember, say Al Nikra Megillah. So they asked him 1 second, there's a huge problem with what you're doing. If Purim falls out on Shabbos, there's a gzeira that you might carry it. So we don't even read it on Shabbos. If Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, the gzeira you might carry. And here, that's instituted on Shabbos, and you're laning it with the bracha, it doesn't make sense. If you lane it without a bracha, so then you say, whatever, it's just a minute, it's nothing. But to lane it with the bracha, it creates that whole problem. So he responded that by Megillas Esther, it's an obligation on every individual. So there's a decree that someone may carry it to his rabbi to teach him how to lane it. But over here, it's on the community, and the community doesn't make those mistakes. So here we're saying that if there's a mavoi, it's on the community. We're not worried about the community making a mistake. It's only on the individuals. The guy may have his personal sukkah over there, thinks it won't be kosher, so that's why it's going to be possible. That's Rav Prazak's explanation for Rabbi's distinction. Ravina Amar, Ravina gives another explanation. Sukkah d'oraisa chmira b'Rabbanan. It's easy. Sukkah is a biblical law. The rabbis are more strict about it. So therefore, you need all the schach to be in a kosher situation. Mavi d'Rabbanan lo chmira b'Rabbanan. Mavi is only rabbinic. The rabbis weren't so strict about it. As long as you satisfy a little bit of the qualifications, this part of it is underneath, that's good enough. We don't have a concern that the bottom part is going to fall in and you'll be left with just the top part. You don't make those kseres. Ravada bar Masna, Masna lashmaita de Rabba ibcha. Ravada bar Masna has the statement of Rabbi as well, but he has it exactly the opposite. Look at this. Amar Rabba, the Mavi pasal b'sukkah ksher, exactly the opposite. By Mavi, it's pasal. If part of the beam is within 20 amas, but part is above, it becomes pasal. By a sukkah, part of the schach is within 20 amas, which is great, but part of it is above, it's kosher. Maishna sukkah de kshera. Why is the sukkah kosher? The Mrinan Kalish, because we'll say, let's thin it out. You remove the top part, imagination, you remove the top part. So, but Mavi nami ne'ema Kalish. So remove the top part by the Mavi and it should be kosher. Says he kalashtas havale kair, and he tells you can't remove the top part. It's kair and he tells us beruach. It's not, you have a beam that's not satisfactory. The Gemara says hachinami kalsas havale chamas from mitzulasav. So the sukkah is also not satisfactory. There's more sun than shade if you remove all the upper part of the schach. Zel al karchach. Rather, what do you have to say? Why is the sukkah kosher? According to this, according to Ravada bar Masna. Al karchach nasas tzilasim rub mechamasa. You have to imagine it. Although I'm removing the top part, but I'm still giving it the strength, or the thickness, or the efficacy of the full schach. So hachanami, you do the same thing over here. Give it the same strength of the beams of metal. Make it as if it's as strong as it is right now, even though I'm removing the top part. In my imagination. So why is there any distinction? Whatever you do to the sukkah, do to the mavi. Amar Rava mi Parzakya. We continue. Rava mi Parzakya explained the first way. He also explains this way. Sukkah de liyachadi rami anafshei midkar. Uses the logic exactly the opposite. See, it's brought in Chassidus. This concept that you can have a svara, a logic, but it doesn't tell you the conclusion, because the logic can go both ways. It says, oh, there's a difference between if it's in the individual or a community. By an individual, what was the last thing we said? By an individual, you have to be strict. We don't know if he's going to fix it. By a community, they're going to take care of everything. Now we say exactly the opposite. By an individual, he realizes that if I don't fix it, who's going to fix it? Rami anafshei midkar. He says, it's my sukkah, I have to take care of it. It's my mavi, rather. It's my sukkah. I have to take care of it. That's why it's kosher. By mavi, I don't have to take care of that. That's the community. It's a community Eruv. I don't have to get involved in that. Someone else was going to do it. What's the Gemara's expression? A pot where two people are in charge of doesn't get hot or cold. I guess if someone wants it hot or someone wants it cold, they won't. No one's going to take care of it. They'll say, "Yeah, whatever." So many people, too many cooks, right? So no one's going to take care of it.
I'm glad to see nothing changes over the years.
Listen, not everybody has the Eiruvin Daf.
As much as it changes, it stays the same. Okay, Ravina Amar. Ravina says a different. You see, we had two options. We have two halachas here. We have a sukkah and a mavi. We have the same question about both. What makes it kosher is partially within the range, partially above the range. We already had two answers. That by the sukkah it's kosher, the mavi is pasal, or by the mavi it's kosher, the sukkah is pasal. We have another two possibilities, and we're going to use those possibilities as well. Ravina says, one second, before I get to those possibilities, Ravina says the same answer that he gave before. Sukkah deraisa le'boy chizuk. Before he said a sukkah is deraisa, we had to be strict. Now he says sukkah is biblical law. We don't have to tamper with it. If it's within 20 amas, it's fine. Mavi the Rabbanan by Chizek. But the rabbinic law, people may be lenient. They say, yeah, it's just the Rabbanan. If it falls in, it's not such a problem. It's anyways rabbinic. So we have to be very strict when we say that if anything is above 20 amos, we invalidate it. Because the Rabbanan needs chizuk, the Daraisa doesn't. It's the same logic, but exactly, the outcome is exactly the opposite. My Havi Allah, what's the conclusion here? Rabbi Baravula Amar Zevis Apostle. Rabbi Baravula says that both of them are puzzle, both the sukkah and the mavi are puzzle because it has a little bit sticking out. Rabbi Amar Zevis Kasher, Rabbi says both are kasher. Sukkah and mavi are both kasher. So you have all four possibilities with this one shaila. Why is both of them kasher? He says chalal sukkah tanan, chalal mavi tanan. It says the empty space, when it says 20 amos, it means that the empty space is 20 amos. And here you don't have it, 20 amos empty. Why? Because it's sticking into the 20 amos. You don't have a full 20 amos. Because it's sticking in, so therefore it's kosher. Amalei Rav Papa Rava. Rav Papa is a student of Rava. And Rava was the one that's just said, Zev Zev Pasal. Rav Papa is a student of Abaye and Rava. It says, Amalei Rav Papa Rava, Tani de Messiah, I have a support for you. Remember that Bryson? He said that if it's that if a mavi is above 20 amos, higher than the doorway of the heichal, then you have to lower it down. Now over there by the heichal, the actual empty space in the doorway was 20 amos. So you see, if it's not all, if all 20 amos aren't empty, then it's kosher. That's a support. Eisir Rasim Barashi, Rav Papa. Rav Simi Barashi asked to Rav Papa. What should a person do? You have to put the kaira from the edge of 20 amos and down. What are you telling me? That once it's within the 20 amos, then it could go up. Then the top of it could be higher. I have a brisa that says that it has to be at the 20 amos and downward. We're going to see that this all has to do with where the comma goes. It's all a grammar. The whole discussion is it's like contracts. How do you want to read this? So the Gemara says, Eima Lamaila. Switch it. Say that it's 20 amos and above is fine. What do you do? It's make it 20 amos and above is also good. It says, what are you doing? It says, no, it says it has to be 20 amos and down. It says, no, Hakamash Malan. The Lamata Kalamaila, you have to go back and read it like this. How tall is a mavai allowed to be? 20 amos. What's the smallest? What's the shortest mavai? How low could that beam go? 10 tfachim. So it's saying like this. What you do is, the lowest is just like the highest. Just like it would be invalid if the empty space underneath the beam is 20 amos. So too, the empty space beneath when we gave a measurement of 10 tfachim, that's the minimal, that means that I need to have a full 10 tfachim as the minimum. Just like above, it's the full 20 amos that makes it puzzle. So below, that's the full 10 tfachim that make it kosher. So how would I read this now? I do, it's the same thing. Not misvas esrim ulamata. You can put it at the edge of 20 and let it go up. Ulamata, it's the same thing. I can put it at 10 and let it go up, but I can't let it go down. I need to have the halal. So ulamata is not telling me which direction it goes. It's telling me the same halacha applies when I'm dealing with the smaller. Okay. In order to understand the next piece of Gemara, just to clarify that when it comes to measurements, we look for natural occurrences to be able to have a standard measurement. So we use, not we, but this scientific world uses the metric system. So it's based on, I think, a cube of water, the weight of water. That's 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter would be a gram. And then based off that, it's also measured by the speed of light and some other things. But it's all supposed to be naturally occurring things. The problem in the olden days is that when you would say, the size of a stick, so it wasn't really, everyone has a different stick. So what they used was the size of the amma, which was from the elbow up to the top of the finger. Now that is not a standard. There's different, people have different sizes. They say, well, the average person, even the average person, what do you mean average? So we have 2 measurements for amma, and we even have more than that. So Amar Abaye Mishmeder Rav Nachman, Abaye says in the name of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, famous Rav Nachman, but he was also the teacher of Abaye and Rav. And Abaye is going to quote him here, and then Rav on the bottom of the page is going to quote him as well. Abaye says, Amma sukkah v'ammas mavi b'amma bas chamisha. Normally an amma has 6 tvachim. Abaye says that when it comes to a sukkah and to a mavi, we're going to be strict. We're going to say that we're going to be using a smaller amma. So for example, when we say that a mavi can only be 20 ammas tall, which type of amma? Big amma or 20 big ammas or 20 small ammas? It says bas chamisha, an amma of 5 tvachim each, a smaller amma. It means you have to be strict about this. Ammas kalayim, when it comes to kalayim, which means how far away you have to distance things from a vineyard, when you're planting in a vineyard, over there it's ba'amma bas shisha. Over there you have to use the strict opinion that it needs to be further apart. It's an amma of 6 tvachim. Ammas mavoi, it's, I guess, we're like the margin of error. We always have to go strict. Ammas mavoi ba'ammas bas chamish my hilchasa. What is it in reference to? What are you saying that it needs to be an amma, that we're going to use an amma that's Dr. Stein, that's going to be the next one. That's Rav's opinion. Yeah, there you go. In Abaye, it's we're measuring an amma 5 or 6 tvachim. That's what we're doing. So what is it in reference to? What it says lagoiva, 20 ammas tall. Those 20 ammas need to be 5 tvachim. The lepirtis mavi, we said that a mavi only works if the doorway is 10 ammas. More than that, it's considered a pirza. More than 10 ammas. We're going to measure that pirza with a smaller measurement, which means you'll be invalidated at a lesser amount. The Gemara says, 1 second, there is a minimal size of an alleyway. If the minimal size uses larger ammas, then that would be strict. If the minimal size uses smaller ammas, then that would be lenient. If you're trying to be strict. So when you said that an amma of a mavoi is 5 tvachim to be strict, but not when it comes to the minimal size of 4 ammas, the alleyway needs to be longer than 4 ammas. If those 4 ammas are smaller, then that's a leniency, and it's still considered an alleyway. Command amar barba tvachim. My answer is, we don't go like that opinion. That 4 ammas. We're not talking about ammas. We anyways hold that a mavi is considered a mavi once it's 4 tvachim. I don't know exactly what you do in there, but if you want to permit it with a crossbeam or a lechi, 4 tvachim will work. I'm sorry?
Do you mean the minimum size of an alley so that it's not a makom patur? What does that mean?
What it would mean is that the way that you make an alleyway kosher has certain leniencies, as opposed to the way you would make a chutzner kosher, which you, by a mavi, you only need 1 beam, either vertical or horizontal. And by a chutzner, you need 2. And when is it considered a mavi? That 1 beam would permit it. So we say it needs to be 4 ammas. It means it's a walkway between the street and the chutzner. We said 4 amos. So the 4 amos, what size is 4 amos? How small? So if it's a larger 4 amos, then that's a stringency. That was our question. So we said we anyways aren't using amos in that measurement. We're using tvachim, and over there's no question. Okay. It's most of the measurements are 4 amos, not everyone. Okay, now so that's an easy way out. We weren't talking about that. So what are you talking about when you said that a sukkah is an amma of 5 tvachim? It says legaiva, that's an easy one. 20 amos tall. 20 amos, you use the smaller measurement to reach 20 amos, not the larger one. Now there's a law that Dr. Stein put this before up, I think, that if you remove the center of your roof to put schach, so the schach is not on the wall, the schach is on the ceiling. Now, that how much ceiling in the center, let's say you have a skylight, you see in the picture, it's like sort of like you take away the skylight. So from the edges of the skylight until the wall could be how much? So there's a rule of doifen akuma. My wall doesn't need to be straight. My wall can go up like this. And as long as I have a sheer sukkah on the top, even though it's diagonal, it's still kosher. So what I can do is, my wall actually goes like, it's not diagonal, but I can imagine it's diagonal. It's called doifen akuma. Now, how long can you make that diagonal? How much space? It says 4 amos. So we say 4 amos, only smaller amos. If you want to bend your wall, means use the roof as part of your wall for the schach, you can only do it up to 4 amos distance from the wall. So those are amos of 4 tvachim. The Gemara says 1 second, but there's an opinion that holds the sukkah needs to be 4 by 4 amos. And if you say it's a 5 tvachim amma, not a 6 tvachim amma, then you're being lenient. It says the Tanya Rabbi Yomi, there's a brisa that says, Rabbi says, I hold kol sukkah shein ba dalet ames al dalet ames psula, that it needs to be 4 by 4. So if you say it's smaller, then you'll have a smaller size for sukkah, which is a leniency. So the Gemara answers kirabanan damri afilu enu machzekas al reishav b'shulchan, and we'll follow the opinion of the rabbis that say that it doesn't have to do with amos. 7 tvachim is the shear of a sukkah, which means that a person can sit there, most of his body and his head and his table can sit in 7 tvachim, and that's the shear of a sukkah. So it doesn't. We weren't referring to the amos there.
That's the pop-up sukkah.
Pop-up sukkah is exactly the measurement. Really, we can say that the opinion follows Rabbi. 4 amos. Reiv amos kamar, and we weren't talking about that one halacha. We meant most of the amos. Okay. There's one more point that we'll discuss in this before we get to Rava. We'll leave that for tomorrow.